4:02, everyone. So we'll go ahead and begin. Hello, my name is Don Hannon. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Jewish Federation, and I want to thank everybody for participating in today's webinar, where we're going to talk about an overview of our thoughts on the Impact Lab. This is, as everybody knows, is the third week in a row we've had a session. The first was on mission, vision, and values. Last week was on the schematic design of the museum. And then this week, of course, is the Impact Lab. So again, we thank you for everyone. This will be taped and recorded, and we'll send that link out to everyone in case there's others who would like to participate. In addition, we'll be attaching the survey. We do appreciate everybody completing the survey. Those have been very helpful. And again, we'll be going through them in more detail after this week's session. So as I mentioned, this week is about the Impact Lab. And we wanted to spend some time to talk about that. And staff, Dan and the team are going to lead us through that. But this one is a little less developed than was the museum experience. You know, I think we've got some great ideas for the Impact Lab, and I think a path moving forward. And we want to share those with you today. So thank you for participating. If you have, again, if you have questions and you would like to submit via the chat function, please do so. This presentation will be shorter than the last one, and we'll try to answer questions. So if you submit them via chat, we'll go ahead and get started here. So with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Dan Rich. Dan, take it away. Oh, sorry, I missed part of my slides. Sorry about that. One of the things we want to point out is that the Impact Lab is in this section C. It's in what's currently if you will, the space in the museum or what's in the library space right now. As you can see, that's about 1,600 square feet, which is about a fifth the size of the museum. And as we get into it, you'll get an idea of what it is we anticipate being in there and how we want to use that space. But we're excited that we're able to have this as a part of our museum experience moving forward. So, am I done, Lori? My last slide. Okay, go ahead. And I'll hand it off to Dan. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, can you all see me? You can hear me. That's the important thing. So you see here a quote from a survivor of Sachsenhausen. I have told you this story not to weaken you, but to strengthen you. Now it is up to you. I'm sure many of you recognize it. It is posted at the conclusion of our current exhibit, right above the last series of videos. And it's well placed there because it sort of links the past, the present, but also looks to the future. And also it's a call to action. Now it's up to you. So in the current exhibition, it links the permanent exhibit to Change Begins With Me. Before Change Begins With Me, relevant lessons of the Holocaust were derived from individuals or were included in docent presentations. A good docent presentation might have made those lessons very clear, but again, the docent could give them greater or lesser attention. In 2012, we were given the generous gift of Change Begins With Me. Was dedicated in December 2012, so 8 years ago this December. And it was, of course, a worthy, very important addition to our permanent exhibit. In 1945, everyone said and certainly hoped, never again. I don't have to tell you, ethnic conflict and genocide, crimes based on hate have continued and continue to this day. So I'm sure you all are familiar with Change Begins With Me. Here you see 3 portions of it. You see the map that shows various hotspots in the world, certainly not without enough room to cover all of the unfortunately horrible things that are going on. The spiral of hate that shows how events can start small and escalate to be more active, to be violent, to the point of genocide. And again, you recognize in the upper portion the famous Niemöller quote, "First they came for this group, for that group. There was no one to speak out when they came for me." Again, a call to action. You have to speak out for others in the hopes that others will speak out for you. The intention of the Impact Lab is to expand on what's already been extremely successful with Change Begins With Me. The idea of making the Holocaust significant and relevant and a call to action today is nothing new. It's always been part of the Holocaust story and Holocaust history. Here you see Elie Wiesel's quote, "Action is the only remedy to indifference." And I know, again, many of you are familiar with Elie Wiesel's quotes about indifference. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The opposite of good, it's not evil, it's indifference. He always makes the point of how indifference contributed and enabled the Holocaust, and we must take action. And I'm starting with Elie Wiesel, but I spoke to our own Rachel Miller and asked her why she speaks. Why does she go through what can be a quite painful experience of recalling what happened to her entire family, her beloved sister? And she said, to keep the memory of her family alive. She does it because, thank God, she's still here to do it. And because there's still genocide in the world today. And our survivor, George Spooner, said something similar. He does this because it's important that people learn this history in the hopes that things don't happen like that ever again, with something of a sigh that we see that they are, and the need to take action against that. Another one of our survivors always ended her talk, remembering must have a component of action. So again, 2 other quotes that came at the time the museum opened 25 years ago. A student said, "Our responsibility is to ourselves and others." Again, it starts with us, but we're also responsible for our brothers and sisters. And we must never again allow a recurrence of this historical pattern. What can happen, what has happened in the past can happen again in the future. And it's part of the Holocaust Museum's mission to do what they can to prevent that. 20 years ago, when I first entered the field first started working at the Holocaust Museum, I remember attending a conference, I think it was in Houston, of the AHO, the Association of Holocaust Organizations. And there was a really lively debate, again, 20 years ago. One side was saying, if you learn the lessons of the Holocaust, or excuse me, if you learn the history of the Holocaust, the lessons are implicit. If you really are understanding what happened, how it happened, then the contemporary lessons will become clear to you, whether they're overtly stated or not. The other side was saying, no, make them clear. Why lose an opportunity to educate the public, especially young people, making the connections to issues going on in our world today? So I could tell you who won that debate. At this time, I don't know a single Holocaust museum that does not either have another agenda or deal with contemporary issues in their exhibit or programmatically. Let's go on. So this is a statement about the Impact Lab that our staff worked on, developed, and here you see it. The Impact Lab at the Holocaust Museum will use the lessons of the Holocaust so that visitors can understand how they, as individuals, can act to make a difference. Using dynamic programming and interactive media, the Impact Lab will foster deeper connections and provoke thoughtful dialogue. Participants will gain a sense of their agency and responsibility in their individual communities and as global citizens to create a more compassionate world. And let's go on. By exploring the Holocaust's relevance today, local, national, and global events through a highly flexible, interactive, and collaborative digital space, visitors learn how the Third Reich exploited their sectors to corrupt important democratic institutions like media, representative government, and human rights. These experiences empower participants to confront their own biases, understand the source and power of information, and take action to support others in their lives. Okay, lots of words there, lots of thoughts there. Collaborative, interactive, enabling, empowering. This is being recorded. Take a closer look at these two statements. Let's go on. So, to compare is not to equate. And I'm attributing this to the USHMM, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Once you start dealing with contemporary issues, how do you properly make those comparisons? What's appropriate? What crosses a line? What trivializes the Holocaust? This has also been an ongoing debate. It's interesting, you may remember it's been over a year now when people, they're certainly doing it now, but they're using Holocaust imagery and comments about contemporary events. And you may remember someone compared the camps at the border, calling them concentration camps. And it created this whole dialogue, and that's not a good comparison, and it's apples to oranges, or it is. Because by definition, if you take it out of context, it was a dialogue. And it's interesting, I'm saying this, because the USHMM came out in the more conservative way with a statement saying, stay away from Holocaust comparisons. They trivialize, they're offensive to survivors, they're often misused. And a lot of scholars got together and wrote a well thought out statement that said, if you can't compare, you can't learn. If the Holocaust is so unique that there's nothing like it, then how do you learn the lessons from it? So again, it was eager to see how that question went back and forth. We had a docent enrichment about that. 2 weeks ago, I come up to 2 weeks ago, and I'm on a Zoom class from the USHMM. And twice the speaker said, to compare is not to equate. And it's simple, 6 words, but it really makes a good point. You need to compare to learn, but you are not equating it. These issues are not the same as the Holocaust. We're not intending them to be, they just aren't. On the other hand, there are points of comparison and points of difference that enable us to learn from the history of the Holocaust. So, as Don said, much of the content of the Impact Lab is still to be determined. But one of the working sort of way that we're working is taking issues that we've observed during the Holocaust, during the historical period, the 30s into the 40s, issues that have continued to be relevant today. Here are just a couple of examples. Anti-Semitism, what the Holocaust was about. Other examples, treatment and disenfranchisement of the other, racism, xenophobia, homophobia, other phobias, immigration and refugee issues, employment issues, and more. Think just as you look at this list, how do these issues occur during the 1930s? People losing their jobs, people losing their rights, people having no place to go. And think how these recur today in a different setting, in different circumstances. Again, compare, do not equate, but how we can make those links from the history to the present day. And again, these are just a few examples. This is who we'd like to consider our primary audiences, at least initially. Our school groups from grade 6 to 12, university students and faculty, young adults, families, professional groups, law enforcement, attorneys, medical professions, the military, not-for-profits, government agencies, corporations. It's a very wide audience, especially when, again, we have not yet determined the specifics of exactly what will be in that space. But these are the takeaways we hope will definitely come out of the interactive, the contemplative spaces, the spaces for individual action or group activity. We hope people will learn about standing up and taking action, of being aware of what's going on in the world around you. Information literacy, reading critically, looking critically, building a sense of compassion and empathy, respect for others, proposing and encouraging the engagement in civil discourse, hot topic these days, collaboration, accountability, and again, it was in those two initial statements, the power of an individual to make a difference. Letting people feel they walk out of here with the ability to do something, to learn something, to have some impact on the world around them. What are our next steps? We have a lot of them, lots to consider, considering and thinking about the content of this particular area, how it will relate to the core exhibition. We will be working with professional experts in curriculum of this kind. We, the museum team. There also will definitely be a period where we'll need to sort of test market this. We will be coming to some educators within our community for reaction. Again, lots to move forward on here, a big challenge. I thought maybe you might be able to see last week, that's where so much of our effort is gone. We're continuing to work on the core exhibit, but now focusing a greater lens on the Impact Lab. So, thank you.
All right, we apologize for the technical difficulties, but it looks like the chat is now working. So I see questions coming in, so feel free to use the chat. Dan, are you ready for your first question?
I am.
All right. In addition to the Change Begins With Me exhibit was the genocide clock. Do you anticipate that it will be part of the Impact Lab?
I can't give a definitive answer at this time. We'll certainly, I can't give a definitive answer. We'll certainly consider it. We have considered it.
Next question. Please define dynamic programming with examples.
So I'm going to be, maybe I could hold up a sign that says unable to give clear answers, certainly specifics, unable to do so. Dynamic in terms of this will be the most interactive part of within the building, within the museum. This will be an opportunity with issues like making decisions or sort of giving an opinion and then seeing how, if other people are agreeing with you, if you're the lone opinion, things like that, responses to issues. But in terms of specifics, I can't answer at this time.
All right. Next question. Could bullying be included in the takeaways?
So some of you may remember years ago, I was always the one saying I had issues with the Holocaust and bullying. Do you need the intentional state-sponsored murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others to deal with acting civil in a playground or in school? But I've come around, because if you speak to a Holocaust survivor, they will tell you that it didn't start with gas chambers, it didn't start with labor camps, ghettos. It started when their friends turned against them. It started when they couldn't play with someone, or someone said they could no longer walk home to school or invite them to a party. That's younger people. Adults had the experience, I can no longer see you as a doctor, or I can no longer do business with you. So it starts with words. It starts with simple actions. So I would say, yes, that would certainly be part of the mix.
All right. And someone else commented, I would add bullying, very relevant to students. Next question, are you considering that after the pandemic, people may be hesitant to use touchscreens and exhibits should reflect this concern in terms of interactivity?
So that's definitely something we're considering in terms of numbers of people in spaces, seating, galleries, and especially here. Gallagher is, as a company, as a group, is really at the forefront of keeping up with what's going on with COVID and what kind of adjustments are going to have to be made. So without being specific, that definitely is going to be taken into consideration. Again, both in terms of what becomes the norm of social distancing and touching, having contact.
Next question. Will there be any consideration of social media and its role in spreading propaganda and hate?
You know, we talked about looking at information literacy, and it's definitely something that links from propaganda in the core exhibit to what we're reading, how we're judging, without being partisan. From now till November, we're all going to hear a lot of messages, and it might be significant to say who's saying that and who's funding that, and is there a more subtle message there, and is there any sort of dog whistle there? So yes, I think that's quite likely.
How much time do you anticipate groups will spend in the Impact Lab?
I think that will depend on if it's a docent taking a group in there, if it's a family that's come in, or a drop-in visitor. You know, we put a lot of those corporate groups or legal groups or medical groups. That's making a lot of assumptions that they're there to do some sort of facilitated program or their own facilitated event. So that would also be an element in how long an individual or group would be in there.
Do you plan to include the Niemöller poem, which I think is very helpful to begin the conversation?
It's hard for me to think that that statement, which is ubiquitous, but only because it's so powerful, won't be present, either in the core exhibit. You know, I'm thinking out loud now. We're also thinking about what will be on the wall as someone goes from the core exhibit to the impact lab, and I wonder if that might not be a good place. You've seen this, learn the lesson from that. If you don't help others, there'll be no one to speak up for you. It will be there somewhere.
This is more of an idea, not so much a question, which maybe we can include examples of what local groups, especially school groups, have done to combat bias, bullying, etc. So I'm going to address this first, and then maybe Dan has something to add. But in the survey we sent out, there is a question of, you know, what do you think must be included? So ideas like this, you can absolutely respond in the survey. But I don't know, Dan, if you have anything to add to this idea.
I think it sounds like a great idea that we would look into finding a way to make that work. Something that is lacking maybe in our current museum is a place for, you know, we talked about a place where a student could leave a little message or something that they learned, or something that stuck with them, or maybe something they learned that would maybe change their behavior or activity. So it'd be nice to have something also like that in our new museum.
I think this question's for me, unless anyone else has something to add. Will time be allowed for both the tour and the impact lab during a school visit? We are still working out the exact logistics. Obviously, the content isn't complete. We're not positive how long the experience is going to be. But we do have classrooms with sinks, with the idea that students can have lunch there, because visits will likely be longer. We anticipate that some groups might want just the Holocaust experience, some groups might want just the impact lab experience, and some groups may want both. So we're, you know, through this, part of my job is working on the menu of options, and sort of they'll be able to tailor their experience. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
That will be your domain.
Can visitors go only to the impact lab and not to the museum proper?
Yes, it's not like you're not restricted to one pathway once you enter the museum, so you could make that choice. Yes.
Will you take the message of the impact lab on the road? Will you visit schools to present this program as a service from the Holocaust Museum?
Something else, Laura, you might add to mine, but I think, you know, look how we're doing this session, and look how we're all attending classes or programs, even seeing plays and concerts on our computers. Some of it, I think, will be very eager to get back to being on site, but I do think some things are going to continue to work remotely. So I'm going to say we're always going to have much more of a remote presence with schools and other institutions through the curriculum that we'll be putting on our website, through lesson plans on our website, things like that, the testimonies of the oral history project that are on our website, the videos of the museum that are on the website. As far as taking it on the road, we shall see. Obviously, we'll maintain connections with the educational community.
Yeah. If I could jump in here, Dan, this is Don. I think that one of the things that will change, I think, with the new museum as well, is a much more extended reach into the community, because, like, I think, as you mentioned, technology gives us that opportunity. And that's part of the museum experience now for a lot of our institutions. So I do think that's definitely a part of the plan as we build out, because it'll allow us to reach those that can't come to the museum. So.
Will there be any artifacts in the Impact Lab?
We talked about that as a possibility, but did not come to a conclusion. So we'd have to be very careful. Well, depending on what hands-on means after COVID-19. But we did talk about, again, creating that link from the permanent exhibit. What was the example? Was it maybe one of our suitcases or trunks with issues of refugees, etc.? So that's been suggested and is under consideration.
And this is Diane. There's certainly the idea that you could use facsimiles, especially of paper documents or other kind of things like that, that could be used. I know that hands-on is very popular, and so it's a possibility. We just haven't gotten that far yet.
All right. Any idea how many visitors can be in the Impact Lab at one time? We anticipated this question and we talked to Gallagher beforehand. The answer is 35 to 50. Depends exactly what exhibits go in there and how much room there is with fire code and all that.
But that is the maximum. It wouldn't be the ideal. It would be within code, but not necessarily, enough space for everyone comfortably. Well, it would be comfortably, but.
Next question is for me. Are we upgrading our ability to communicate with docents and utilize online scheduling? Yes, I am working on that. That's what I can say right now. Unfortunately, there's not a software that does everything that we want it to do or do it the way that our museum operates. So it's not just as easy as signing up. It's finding what will be the least workarounds. But yes, we will have online scheduling. Next question. How can you just go to the lab without learning about the Holocaust first?
Obviously, it's not ideal, but we can highly recommend, and I would imagine signage would indicate this is where you begin your visit to the museum. But just as people sometimes just come and look at Change Begins With Me and don't go through our museum, or they sort of rush through the museum because there's one part of it that they're particularly interested. So I don't know that we'll have that kind of control. It certainly isn't maximizing the experience.
There's several parts to this question, so I can repeat it if it gets long. Will we be able to address events that come up in the world, such as related to genocide, anti-Semitism, hate crimes, etc., in a timely manner? Will our role as Holocaust Museum be with these issues? Will we use ADL, JCRC, handle these issues, or will we be at the center?
So the slide of the images from Change Begins With Me said, expanding on that success. You may remember that was a partnership with the museum. Also, ADL was involved and some faculty from Webster University was involved. So when I say expanding on that, I'm going to think the idea would be to keep it the opportunity to deal with current contemporary issues in the Impact Lab. Yes. Again, that's that sort of Change Begins With Me on steroids.
I know one issue with Change Begins With Me is that current events happened, like Pittsburgh, and the software was outdated, it was hard to add those. So obviously we ended up adding Pittsburgh, but we, unfortunately, with all the events happening, we couldn't stay on top of it because the software was so cumbersome. So hopefully this software will be much more user-friendly to keep it relevant. Next question. What about individual computers accessible in the Impact Lab?
I think I can, I think we haven't determined what technology will be in the Impact Lab. We just know it will be interactive. We know it will be, is very supportive of the way students particularly learn, but the way people receive information. So we don't have, I mean, I would assume some of that, but we don't have the technology completely figured out yet.
And of course, ADA compliant.
Of course, thank you for that. Yeah, yes, of course.
At one time, we talked about having an area that could be used for younger children, the bulk of the museum being too much for their level of development. Could this area be used for those younger children?
We had a conversation about this when you saw the primary targeted group start with 6th grade. We thought that was a good place to start, with that being the ideal grade to come visit the museum. But we did talk about adding on, we'll take a lot of careful consideration, to do things either geared towards families that might include children younger than 6th grade, and have something in there for that age group. But we thought we'd sort of postpone thinking about that.
This is in response to something that was discussed a little earlier. Yes, individuals could come only to Change Begins With Me and not go further into the museum. But would we allow groups to reserve time and only go to the Impact Lab?
I
And then someone else added, just going to the Impact Lab without lessons of the Holocaust is not consistent with our mission statement. Do you disagree?
No, I agree. So I would say the experience we're providing is both. I wonder if maybe a group could return to the Impact Lab. But I see the two working together. But again, certainly for families or individuals or drop-ins, we don't have that control. We do but we also said that could serve some adult groups. So I don't want to say no, that we would never have a group just be in the Impact Lab. We'd have to think that through. We're certainly conceiving of it as a unified experience.
That is all of the questions I have on my list. So if people have remaining questions, please ask them, or if I accidentally missed your question, please retype it again so that I see it and I can ask.
While we're waiting, Lori, I'll go ahead and do my wrap up. And again, thank everyone for participating. We had great attendance today, a lot of great questions. I know this is an area people have a lot of interest in. I think what we've done over the last couple of weeks is really, I think there was some confusion, but it's really clarified the fact that the focus, that this is a Holocaust museum, and that is our focus, and that we will be, using, as we say in our mission, the lessons of the Holocaust to teach, and that's an important part of what we want to do. As a follow-up, you will be getting the survey tomorrow, as well as a link. We'll be sending it to the whole list, as well as a link for those who were not able to participate today. They can watch it, and then we encourage everybody to please complete the survey that we'll send out, and we find those very helpful, as I said. So I don't know, Lori, have there been any more questions?
Not yet. And I just want to remind everyone that the meeting on Thursday, this Thursday with
Thank you.
Patrick Gallagher, it is 5 p.m. Note that is different than what these past 3 meetings have been. And there was a link sent out in all of the HMLC emails. It was in those, and it will be included in the email tomorrow as well. So we hope you can enjoy us. And we hope you can join us in that conversation with Patrick Gallagher.
And I have a question and a complaint. Because of technology, you can't see me. And I'm wearing a tie. I put on a tie for this. So, hello everyone. And I am wearing a tie because this is important stuff. And thank you so much
Yes.
for your attention.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.